Okay, Saxon 3 math class, we are ready for lesson 3 today. And you folks at home, we have just done this really cool hands-on activity. The title of our lesson is Reading a Clock to the Nearest 5 Minutes. But we did an activity that showed how a clock is really just a number line. And we took a strip of paper that I had measured all the way around to make sure that it would fit around our little student clock, play clocks, just perfectly. And I'll show you. And we numbered it all the way to 12, and we divided it into 12 sections, but we had to make 11 folds in our paper. And so if you take the 12 and you put that paper right at the tip top and you wrap it around, we discovered that a clock really is just a number line in the shape of a what, you guys? A circle. And we learned that in between our numbers, we had to make 4 tick marks. But when you make 4 tick marks, it gives you how many spaces? 5. So there are 5 minutes in between these big numbers. And that was our cool hands-on activity today before we got started. Let me close that out. Now we're ready for the new concept on lesson 3. That's on page 17 at the bottom of the page. And we've got, it says 2 types of clocks. One's called analog. Can you guys say analog? Analog. That's like what we have on our classroom wall. That's an analog clock. And I have some of those in my house, but I also have the other kind that just has the digits on it, and that's called a digital clock. Can you say that? Digital. How many of you have an analog clock somewhere in your house? Raise your hand. Good. Hands down. How many of you have a digital clock somewhere in your house? Okay. Usually we have kind of both kinds. And we've already talked about that an analog clock has hands. One is a short hand that points to the hour, and that's what we always look at first. Always look at the shorthand first. It's going to tell you the hour, okay? Sometimes that shorthand will be between 2 numbers, like right now. Our shorthand is between the 8 and the 9, but guess what? We always have to go with the one that comes before. So what comes before, 8 or 9? 8 comes before 9, so we have to say it's 8 something. Now we have to look at the long hand, and it's perfect right now. It's pointing directly to the 8. So we're going to start straight up on the 12, and you're going to pretend like this is a board game and that you're jumping your little pawn, but you don't get to count until you make your first jump. So we're starting at the 12. Are you guys with me? And we've already talked about how we should really count by 5s. We should do some counting patterns like we did yesterday. So starting at the 12, when I make that first jump, we're going to say 5, okay? Here we go. Get ready. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So it's 8:40. That's the time. Is it AM or PM? AM. AM really stands for anti-meridian, but we are going to remember that as all morning. And PM stands for post-meridian, so we are going to remember that as it's past the morning, okay? That's going to be the little trick we use. All morning or past morning, okay? Wonderful. Turn the page, you guys. We just did exactly what the diagram shows, except we didn't stop at the 6, Braden. We went all the way to the what? We went all the way to the 8. See how they stopped on the 6? And that's how many minutes after? That's 30 minutes after, isn't it? But we went all the way to the 8, because if we kept counting by 5s, when it got to the 7, we would say 35, and then 40, okay? Now let's take a look at where, did you guys see where it says 12:30? Okay, it says we refer to 12 o'clock in the middle of the day as noon. Can you say noon? Yes, we refer to 12 o'clock at night as what? Midnight. Yes. Okay, and we have already talked about AM and PM, but let me tell you when it changes. When we get back from lunch today and we're looking at the clock and it turns from 11:59 a.m. and then it's 12 o'clock, well, it's not morning anymore. And when you hit 12 o'clock in the middle of the day at noon, it changes to PM. But in the middle of the night, at some point, it's not night anymore and it changes to the next day. And that is when it's at 11:59 p.m. and then it hits 12 o'clock midnight. It's the next morning, and so it's a.m. So this year when we're staying up at New Year's Eve and it's 11:59 and everybody's counting it down, that's p.m. But when it hits 12 o'clock and it's January 1st of the next year, then it's going to be a.m. because it's the next morning. Wonderful. Look at the digital clock. This is what it looks like for 12:30 p.m. And the analog clock at the top of the page is showing you 12:30 p.m. We'll say p.m. Look at that analog clock again at the very top of your page. Look at the shorthand. Raise your hand when you can tell me which two numbers it is between. And remember, you should try to answer all of my questions. If you daydream, is your brain getting any smarter? No, try to answer every question. I'm going to say it again. Look at that shorthand. What two numbers is the shorthand pointing between? Kelton, you are looking at the longhand. Look at the shorthand. It's pointing between the over here. It's pointing between the 12 and the 1. Do you see that? And we always have to go with the one that comes before. So which one do we have to go with? The 12 o'clock comes before 1 o'clock, so we have to go with the 12, okay? Now let's look at our examples, you guys. I've talked enough. Whoops. Let me go back to our examples. So touch example 1 in your book. Wiggle your finger. Touch example 1. That will tell me you're listening and you're in the right spot. Good. If it is evening, I already know that it's which, AM or PM if it's evening? PM, I already know that. If it is evening, what time is shown by the clock? You guys, which hand do we look at first? The shorthand, and it's between two numbers. It's between the 9 and the 10. And we always have to go with the one that comes before. I don't like to say first because then it gets confusing with the 12 and the 1. But we know that 12 o'clock comes before 1 o'clock. So I like to say go with the one that comes before. So we have to go with the what? The 9 on this one. Now we're ready to look at the long hand. It is pointing directly to what number? 4. So we start at the 12. It's kind of like the start spot on a game board. But do you get to count when you start? No, you have to wait until you take the first hop. So we're going to start hopping, and we're going to hop on the big numbers. Here we go. Get ready. 5, 10, 15, 20. So this clock is showing 9:20 p.m. because it's evening. Let's try another one. Let's look at, oh, this one is a tricky one. Look at the bottom. What time will it be in 1 hour? Everybody give me a fist and say 9:20. 9:20. And then what comes next? Now we're going forward. 10:20. You got it. That's how you do it. And in another hour it would be 11:20, and then 12:20, and then what? 1:20. Very good, Aiken. Very good. Okay, lesson practice. Everybody point to the lesson practice. It's in that white bubble. It's not a blue label. It's a kind of a white one. And touch clock A. What do we look at first? The shorthand. Everybody answer me. The shorthand is between the 7, and the 8. But we have to go with the what? 7. So at that point, if I were doing this on paper, I would go ahead and write down the 7 and that colon. Look on our wall. You see the dot up there at the top? It's called a colon. You use it in time and you use it in writing too, but we're using it in time now. So we do 7 colon. Now we have to look at the long hand. But where's our starting position if we're pretending this is a game? Starting position is at the 12. And every time we jump to a big number, we're going to count by 5s. Here we go. Get ready. 5, 10, 15. So what time is clock A? 7:15, and it told us up here, it said it's morning, so we know it has to be a.m. Now, a lot of my kids in the past have learned, oh boy, I can't leave off the a.m. or p.m. Miss Shirley will take off points on the test. So if you leave it off, you're not going to get it completely correct, okay? Everybody look at B. Touch B, clock B. If you touch it, that shows me that kid knows exactly where we are and they're paying attention, and I appreciate it. We have to look at which hand first? The short hand. That's right. We have to look at the short hand. It's between the 10 and 11, so we have to go with the 10. Yes. Now we have to look at the long hand, but where's our start position on our game board? It's at the 12. And we're going to count by 5s. Here we go. Get ready. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So it's 10:40 a.m. This is pretty easy, isn't it? Now let's look at clock C. Here we go. We're looking at which hand first? The short hand. Sit up nice and tall. Now, this is really tricky, you guys. I know it looks like it's pointing directly to the 7, but it is just a smidge before it. So it's really between the 6 and the 7. And what do we have to go with? We have to go with the 6. Okay, now to figure out the long hand, it's like a game, and we have to start at the 12, and we're counting by 5s. Here we go. Get ready. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55. So it's 6:55 a.m. And in 5 more minutes, it will be 7 o'clock, and that shorthand will be pointing directly at the 7. But if you look in your book super, super close and you take your fingernail, it is just barely right before that 7. Okay? Now we're going to go to the written practice. It's going to be your homework, and we have 15 problems today.